The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning to this April 27th as we move along in these sometimes challenging days, and appreciate everybody being here this morning. We have a nice group of guests with us this morning, and look forward to that. I'm Tom Addis, the Executive Director of the Southern California PGA, and we'll have with us, as usual, Len Dumas, who is the Executive Director of the Northern Cal PGA, among others, who will hopefully enlighten you on activities and programs going forward through this COVID challenge. And as Len likes to say, not to take a message from him, but we're one day closer and seem to be gaining on that in some cases throughout the state, with more and more agencies allowing golf to open, which is very nice. One thing I'm going to say, and you'll hear more about this as time goes on, is that as we do open, we need to ensure that we're following all the guidelines for safety, making sure that every person who visits our facility, staff, as well as our guests, are following the guidelines that are set, because we do set an example for outdoor activities, and we want to continue to do that as time goes on here, and we appreciate that. This morning, along with Tony Latendre, our president, Dee Moriarty, Northern California president, we have Secretary John Linder with us, Ed Langhammer, who is an attorney specializing in labor laws and other information. And then, of course, Craig Kessler and Kevin Fitzgerald, our usual suspects here with us every Monday and Friday, and we appreciate everybody being here. Nikki Gatch, the COO, Assistant Executive Director of the Southern Cal PGA, will handle the Q&A as we move along here. So we will have a really busy hour for you, or maybe more, as we go along. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the Southern California section PGA President, Mr. Tony Latendre, for some opening words.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being on the call this morning. And Tom, thank you for the introduction. Len, thanks for everything, and everybody that's going to present today. So thank you very much in advance for all of that. Since Tom took my message this morning about everybody following the rules and setting an example, I think I'll just add a little candor to this and just say, I can tell you in our little pocket of Orange County, it is evident that everyone is eager to get out and play golf. We've pushed our tee times back here at Dove Canyon to starting at 8 o'clock, and we're doing 15-minute intervals, and we've got people on the tee sheet until almost 5 o'clock every day, which is a little longer than normal for us. So it's evident everybody's trying to get back out, and all the more important, like Tom said, that we make sure we set an example and follow the rules, because at the end of the day, being one of the first waves to open, we're fortunate in that, but a lot of eyes are on us. So hopefully we keep that in mind as we move through this. You know, patience is king here. Even in Orange County here, just within our county, we're seeing different rules and different enforcement, which is really kind of sad, to be honest with you, that we can't come up with one standardized set, but it's just a matter of interpretation. So we just have to grin and bear it and go along with what we can do, and not try to take matters into our own hands, so to speak, and just kind of roll with it. So if anybody has any questions, I'm always available. Love to chat, love to see what you're doing, love to compare notes, and I'm happy to share anything that we're doing here at the club if anybody's interested. So I won't take up any more of the time, but appreciate the opportunity just to say hello and let everybody know we're still trying to stay sane here in South Orange County.
Thanks, Tony, very, very much, and I think we all share your view. Thank you. Mr. Dumas, good morning.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of President Moriarty and the Board of Directors and the membership of Northern California PGA, just welcome everyone to another one of our tremendous sessions. You know, we can talk about the admin at the end with MSRs and such, but I'd just like to emphasize the points that have been brought up. Tom mentions particularly in compliance to the rules. I visited one of our larger facilities on Saturday. They have been open and the protocols are in place, and they take it very seriously. The footprints are on the floors, the screens are up in the golf shop at the cashier's table, if you will. But more importantly, two things struck me. One is there's an announcement made about every 45 minutes about how important it is to adhere to the social distancing guidelines and the other conditions that are in place to keep us open, because as Tom mentioned, it is up to us. It's up to us as the professionals. It's up to us as the players to ensure the benefits of the game and the fact that we can do it, because each day, it seemed, particularly last week, more and more counties are coming online and the picture is getting brighter all the time. The other part that they mentioned, that they do have flyovers. They periodically, some helicopters come over and so on and so forth, and there'll be visits from the county officials and such. And so it's out there and it's being taken very seriously, but it also shows that it can be done, and it can be done successfully. And so we're really grateful for that. So I want to thank Secretary John Linder for joining us today. John, great news out of Michigan, and which I'm sure you'll relay to us, to Ed Langhammer. Ed, thank you for joining us on the ever-changing world of unemployment insurance and such. I know tomorrow's a big day for that, actually, for the independent contractors and the self-employed. And Craig and Kevin, of course, and Tom and Nikki and Tony and Dee Dee for being here and helping all of this come together. So Tom, thanks so much, and let's move on.
Thanks, Len. And again, I'd like to remind you too, before we go to John for a quick message, that we are taking questions. If you look on your panel, just to the right of your screen, you'll see a question opportunity. Please do so for the speakers and for us. We'll respond to most of the questions today, we hope. But if we don't respond, we will send your question on via email. So please use that when you can, use that feature when you can. Again, this is you'll receive an hour MSR credit for this chat. Ask every chat that you have some patience with us, that the credits are stacking up with the webinars that we're having in both Southern and Northern California. So we're doing our best, and we'll get that taken, those credits applied as soon as possible. Now with that, the Secretary of the PGA of America, for a few words, Mr. John Linder. Thanks, John.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me on again. Just a couple of brief updates. Obviously, phase one of the Golf Relief and Assistance Fund is completed. We are still working on what the final tally looks like at this point in time, but the initial information that we're getting is about $4.5 million will be handed out to those that are in need within our industry. We knew there were some glitches with E4E. Those are being worked on for phase two. Phase two will roll out sometime around the end of May. May 26th is our targeted date, and that will allow people to once again apply for additional grants up to $3,500. If you have a grant already for $500 or $1,500, that would be capped at $3,500 total, so an additional $3,000 or additional $2,000, depending upon what grant you were awarded. You know, with that being said, we're working on still finalizing the details for the PPC and how we roll that out in July. We're targeting that to occur in July, and how we can put on an event like that in a safe manner. PGA Championship is still on go right now. Obviously, there's a lot of different talks, and you've heard Seth and Susie, who continue their Friday afternoon talks about what the PGA Championship may look like at TPC Harding Park. We've got a couple of different options in place, whether we hold it with fans or whether we hold it without fans. But we're still moving down that direction at this point. Other than that, really, you know, Susie, Jim, and I are still on our calls twice a week. We really are trying to work hard on some of the information that we try to get out to the PGA members. PGA.org is still a great asset for you to find information. John Easterbrook and Jeff Price have worked really hard, Tony, on something that you've asked, what you alluded to earlier, was a way in which we can open up safely. So they actually have a back to golf plan that kind of mirrors the Getting America Back to Work plan, a 3-phase plan. It mirrors that. It's now sitting before the CDC as far as recommendations to see if they concur with what we have designed for a rollout plan. There will also be an ad campaign about back to golf that will roll out here very shortly, that will kind of preach the benefits from a lot of different stakeholders within the game, whether it's tour players, whether it's the average player, whether it's a celebrity. And Jeff Price is working extremely hard on that to get that rolled out sooner rather than later. Here in Michigan, we are open. We are once again in another state of confusion. We open for exercise purposes only and walking. And in the previous executive order, there was some unclearness as to whether or not a member could walk on a private property versus walking on a public golf course. And so there are a lot of public golf courses that had angst that members of private clubs were getting to get out and play golf while they were not open. What I'm finding now with golf being open is the executive order doesn't state it specifically, but in a Q&A with the Attorney General, golf carts are not permitted. We're still under a minimal business operation. So golf carts and ranges are not supposed to be open, not supposed to be used. Finding a lot of the public golf courses, obviously trying to drive revenue, are allowing golf carts, do have ranges open, are basically open full bore. So there's more angst again in Michigan as to whether you're a private facility and whether you're a public facility. And unfortunately, what we have going on here is a little bit of what you were talking about. We're trying to adhere very strictly to the guidelines. We do not let anybody in the clubhouse at this point in time. We have walking only. We have 15-minute tee times. And Tony, to your point, I am really impressed with the pace of play. How the 15-minute tee times have impacted our tee sheet. They're full now, and we're finding players are walking. They're walking with a 15-minute spacing. I haven't had one complaint about pace of play. They're playing quicker, ironically, than if they were in carts. And it seems to be, at one point or another, I'm going to recommend that we used to be 10-minute tee times here at the Country Club of Lansing. I'm going to recommend that we actually not ever go back to 10-minute tee times. We stay either at 12 to 15 minutes because the spacing has been really enjoyable. And I think we get enough players out on the golf course for us on a daily basis. So that's kind of the update from here in Michigan. We're here, stay at home until May 15th at this point. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky kind of all have followed suit in the same pattern as far as how we've opened up golf at this point in time. And what I have noticed is that the people are coming out to play. They really do enjoy it. I see more families coming out and playing, which is a huge positive in my opinion. I've seen more and more families out playing than ever before. And we've been open 3 days. We've had over 100 players every day. People that normally don't walk are walking. I'm a little leery of what message that may have going forward, whether they find that walking is more enjoyable than riding carts and that revenue goes away. But it's been really nice for us to be open. We've got a nice day here today, and we're gonna have a nice day again tomorrow. And people are just really having a great time playing golf, which is good for our game and good for our industry.
Great, John. Thank you. And nice days ahead for sure. And John typically will hang around throughout this chat. If you have any questions for John, please post them and we'll get them answered for you. At this time, it's very, very nice to welcome Ed Langhammer, our attorney from Pasadena, to discuss labor laws, rules, activities with you, among other things, and representing Cozen and O'Connor. And Ed, we appreciate you being here this morning. and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks, Tom, for that great introduction. Hopefully, there you are. Let me do this. Thank you. Hopefully, you all can see me now and can also see my presentation. So let me just say first a word about me. I'm a member of Cozen O'Connor, and we have offices in 27 cities all over the country and some offices overseas and in Canada. So we are 24/7 on coronavirus related issues for our clients. We have a coronavirus task force. We cover as much as we can, and to somebody's earlier point, this stuff is changing on a daily basis. You think you know what you know, and you know, you wait until you see the news, and all of a sudden you realize you don't know what you thought you know. So in any event, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all for inviting me. Unemployment insurance is what we're going to talk about today, and that again continues to be an ever-changing landscape. But before we get to the unemployment insurance part, I wanted to talk about the other benefits that are potentially available, just to mention them, because some of these benefits are going to tie into the other benefits that we'll talk about. So of course, we're going to focus today on unemployment insurance, which is someone's not able to work, either coronavirus related or non-coronavirus related. And they're ready, willing, and able to work, but they can't work because of the financial circumstances that our businesses are facing. If on the other hand, you're sick and you can't work because you're sick, then here in California, of course, and in most other states as well, in fact, all states, I'll venture a guess, have disability insurance. Now here in California, that's funded through the EDD, the Employment Development Department. Here in California, we also have paid family leave, which is made by requesting it from your employer. And that's a benefit that's mandated by California law. Some local cities, some local jurisdictions have their own version of it. And then, of course, there's workers' compensation. If someone is injured as a result of an exposure to coronavirus, then, of course, they would be able to avail themselves of workers' compensation protection. And then finally, you have company paid sick and paid time off. So these are all the benefits, all the tools in the toolboxes that employees potentially have to help them. And I'm sorry, I didn't change that slide, so I'll pause here for just a sec to let you see where it is that I've just discussed. And by the way, I'll say if anyone wants a copy of this PowerPoint afterwards, let me know and I'll make it available. So here in California for unemployment insurance, we've got really the two different flavors for it. One is coronavirus, COVID-19 related claims. And here in California, if it's a layoff, it's a furlough. I don't like using the word furlough, but it's basically a termination under California law. Then, of course, if you have reduced work hours, you can file for unemployment. If you can't work because of school closures and you're caring for a child, you're entitled to unemployment insurance. But then we also have the traditional unemployment insurance claims, which is the traditional termination. It doesn't have anything to do with coronavirus. And we also have, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in another context, but we have the issue of self-employed persons who may be able to take advantage of unemployment insurance. And here in California, the traditional test is a misclassification test. It's where you think somebody's an independent contractor, for example, but at the end of the day, they're determined to be an employee. So on top of the California unemployment insurance, we also have federal unemployment insurance. And there's two different pieces to that. One is we have the CARES Act, which, as you know, was passed, seems like a lifetime ago, but passed several weeks ago. And under the CARES Act, employees are eligible for an additional $600 a week. So, for example, if an employee is eligible for at least $1 in regular unemployment payments each week, then they're entitled to automatically get the extra $600 a week. And when I say automatic, I do mean that under the program as it's being administered by the EDD, It's actually going to be automatically added to eligible persons for them to get their extra $600. Now it's going to start, now it's a little different here in California, but it's going to start the week ending March 29, 2020, which has already happened. And because the EDD uses a Sunday through Saturday weekly period, it cuts off a little bit earlier than the official law. It's going to end the week ending July 25, and again, because it cuts off a little bit earlier. Here's one big issue: is it going to be extended? We don't know yet. There's a possibility it might be, but we don't know. So that's one piece, the CARES Act. Now, the other thing that we've heard a lot about recently is the PUA, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And under that program, which, as someone mentioned, tomorrow's the kickoff day. Tomorrow's the big day where this thing is. They're going to start taking applications. And I will mention one thing with respect to this right off the bat, and with respect to the Employment Development Department, the EDD here in California. They are absolutely slammed. There was just an article in the LA Times today that says they are just so behind. They're using 30-year-old computer systems, and systems are crashing, and they're just not able to process all the claims. They're just completely overwhelmed. So when your workers are applying, when folks are applying for these benefits, patience is going to be required because they're absolutely slammed. In fact, they're so slammed that they're waiving some of the criteria they ordinarily require for folks to be able, must certify that they're entitled to the benefits. So having said that, the PUA is going to be administered by the EDD, and it's going to provide up to an additional 39 weeks of benefits for employees. And those benefits are going to start, it's retroactive. So the benefits will start the week ending February 2nd, 2020, and it's going to go all the way through December 26, 2020. So who's eligible? And this is where it's very different from what traditional unemployment has provided. It's for folks who don't qualify for regular unemployment benefits in California or another state, and also don't qualify for state disability or paid family leave benefits. And again, if you're listening from outside of California, your own states will have some version of state disability insurance. They may or may not have a paid family leave benefit program. But here's the part that's really interesting and different. It's going to cover, for unemployment purposes, business owners. Now, I think the criteria for what's a business owner is a little bit vague, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But it's going to cover self-employed individuals, and this is very different. It's going to cover independent contractors, and it's going to also cover folks who qualified for regular unemployment insurance benefits, but they've collected all the benefits they're eligible for. There are limitations. For example, for non-citizens of the United States, they must be legally permitted to work in the United States at the time the services, meaning the work, was performed, and they were authorized to work for any week that PUA benefits are claimed to be eligible for payments. So hot off the press, on Friday, the Department, DOL is the Department of Labor, that's the federal agency that administers this program. So the congressional liaison, Mr. Wheeler, said, with respect to the guidance that the DOL has issued to us, that becomes our marching orders, is their guidance remains a work in progress. And what he said specifically, because Congress expressed some concerns about the standard for including independent contractors. Independent contractors include the gig workers, the Uber drivers, the Lyft, the DoorDash, all of those folks who are working in the gig economy that are not part of the traditional labor pool. So what Mr. Wheeler said was that independent contractors who have a significant diminution of work as a direct result of COVID-19 can collect benefits under PUA, even if they have some work. So, as a lawyer, I look at that, I look at the guidelines, and I ask myself, what does that really mean? To what extent does someone who's going to apply have to show what's a significant diminution? What does that actually mean? As I sit here today, I don't have answers to that. And the best I can say is stay tuned. There's will be further developments on this stuff. Now, the other criteria that's very important for PUA is that it has to be one of the COVID-19 related criteria. And what that means is these are criteria that may look familiar to you if you've been at all dealing with the issues in the workplace and the circumstances under which employees either are not allowed to work or are unable to work. But if you've experienced a COVID, if you actually have been diagnosed with COVID, if you have symptoms of COVID, and you're seeking a medical diagnosis, you're not able to work because the healthcare provider has told you can't work. Someone in your household's been diagnosed with COVID-19. You're caring for a family member or a member of your household who has it. A child or other person in your household, if you have primary caretaking responsibility, is unable to attend school or another facility that closed because of COVID-19 related issues. You're the breadwinner, you're major support for a household. And you had to quit your job because of COVID. Your place of employment is closed. Your job that you thought you had is now unavailable. Or you just can't reach your workplace. Now, here's the other thing. This is new also, and this ties into this independent contractor part. If you work as an independent contractor with reportable income, you can also qualify for PUA benefits if you're unemployed, partially employed, or unavailable to work because the COVID public health emergency has severely limited your ability to continue performing your customary work activities and thereby forced you to start working. Now, remember a couple slides ago, I told you what Mr. Wheeler said. So he's changed that up a little bit by saying it's a significant diminution of work as a direct result of COVID-19. So again, the takeaway on that is we don't really know what this all means and how it's all going to work out. So how do the payments work? So there's going to be 3 phases of benefit payments. And phase 1 is each week you're unemployed from February 2nd, 2020. Again, this is a look back period to March 28, 2020, also a look back period, due to a COVID related reason. And so you'd be entitled to $167 per week. So since this program's only going to start to be administered, folks will be looking at getting retroactive payments if they're entitled. Phase 2 is what's in effect from March 29 through July 25, which now ties in with the CARES Act. You're going to get your $167 if you're an eligible worker, plus you're going to get the extra $600 a week. And that's going to be added to your unemployment compensation. And then there's going to be a phase 3, and that's $167 a week for each week from July 26 to December 26, 2020, that you are unemployed because of a COVID-19 related reason. Again, up to a total of 39 weeks, minus any weeks that you receive for regular unemployment and certain extended unemployment benefits that you've received. So I think there's going to be an issue with respect to penalties, whether there's going to be any false statement penalties. In California, the traditional law, which has been in place for a long time, if there's a false statement or misrepresentation regarding the circumstances of termination of an employee's employment and employee's reemployment, then those circumstances, and there are other circumstances. California law has other penalties that attach for different aspects of the unemployment and the other benefits. But for these purposes, it's worth noting that these penalties can be assessed against either an employer, an employer's agent in certain circumstances. Agents can include your CPA, your outside bookkeeper, an attorney if an attorney is involved, or both. And it will depend on the specific penalty. And these are all a little bit different. But the takeaway is, if there is a penalty, generally, the weekly penalty, or the penalty that can be assessed, is 2 to 10 times the claimant's, the worker's weekly benefit amount. So it's critical to take into account and to understand that we all want to help our workers. We want to help folks to the extent we can, but we do have to be mindful that documents, information, everything that's submitted to the Employment Development Department, either directly because of the California programs or the federal programs that our EDD is administering, it's critically important that you be mindful to be accurate in the reporting, to make no material misrepresentations, and to just be mindful of those requirements. On the federal side, there's going to be oversight. It'll be after the fact, but on the federal side, there'll be a requirement to certify, which is to answer basic questions for benefit payments every 2 weeks. If you're still unemployed, that you're otherwise eligible to continue receiving biweekly payments. Since it's just starting, an EDD to some extent, again, here in California, is waiting for additional guidance and additional clearance. We don't really know to what extent and how that's actually going to look, and when that additional guidance is going to come out. So again, we're going to have to stay tuned for additional information, and as we go along, it's what we've said in the beginning, what other folks have said, what we think we know now, we may not know, or may not know what we thought we know, and we'll be figuring it out as we go along. So again, final thoughts, and I do appreciate your time. These programs are a work in progress. As always, we're going to have to keep an eye on further guidance from the Department of Labor, from the EDD. There are going to be changes. We don't know how they're going to look and what they're going to look like. The interesting thing from the California EDD's perspective is what they have said and what they've encouraged is for workers to file any and all claims that you think you may be eligible for, and the EED will make that determination. And to get back to what I said earlier about disability, if you think you might have a disability, but it might also be unemployment related, then file a claim. The EDD will make that determination as to what bucket you're going to fall in, either the unemployment bucket or the disability bucket. And we've already mentioned it. I'll mention it again. I think, as always, there is going to be a potential for fraud, for abuse, for misrepresentation. And those of us who represent companies, those of us who are operating golf courses, who are administering your facilities, who are dealing with these issues, and as they evolve, we are more likely than not going to be living with the fallout and the ramifications of all of this for some time to come. Hopefully, not that long, but we really don't know. It's hard to predict what the future is. It's terrific that some courses are being allowed to open, some folks are being allowed to get back to work, and, adjusting the pace of play and taking all the other precautions that you need to take. And you've talked about it already, but I'll just mention one other thing that I don't have a slide for, but I have, from my law firm, we've developed a return to work post-coronavirus checklist. And I have that available. And I know it sounds like you folks have a terrific amount of resources available and do's and don'ts on how to administer golf courses and how to take care of what you're doing. But if any of you thought it would be helpful to have in hand, I would be delighted to send to you or have it available. And Tom maybe can assist on that. The return to work post-coronavirus checklist, which may also just be some additional information for you and could be helpful for you. And I thank you for your attendance and your attention. I don't know that there's any questions. I don't know, Tom, I don't know if we have time for questions, but let me know.
Yeah, Ed, thank you. And we do have time for questions, and I know there are a number of them that Nikki will get to you. Yeah, we would appreciate your PowerPoint. That's great. We can post that if it's all right with you on scpga.com and ncpgalinks.com for access. And then any information that you want to provide to us will ensure that it gets out to our both our memberships and other interested parties and associations. No problem at all with that. So I'm sure Nikki has a few questions for you. So thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed. A couple of these you might have addressed, but just maybe for some clarification and confirmation. First one, once I start back to work, if it is at reduced hours or shifts, say 20 hours or 3 shifts, would I still be eligible to receive compensation for the difference from my regular pay? I am currently receiving unemployment benefits.
Yeah, I'll mention just one thing is since there's, and this is just lawyer speak, but since there's no attorney-client privilege, I can't respond to specific questions about somebody's own particular circumstances because there's no attorney-client privilege and this is being recorded and certainly this is a public broadcast. So having said that, to answer the question more generally, and I did think I talked about this a little bit earlier, if you are working a reduced schedule because the work is just not available as a result of either coronavirus issues, or even if it were a result of just traditional non-coronavirus issues, which hard for me to come up with an example on that at this point. But yes, you would be entitled to get benefits from the EDD with respect to having reduced hours, and you are probably going to be eligible for federal benefits as well. So again, the takeaway on always is if someone believes that they're eligible, then they are encouraged to apply. The challenges with EDD are the challenges of getting through and actually getting the claim filed. But some patience and persistence, you can get that done. Thank you. Nikki?
Okay, thank you. I think we had quite a few that kind of were along those same lines, or if they are a golf professional that has a salary working in the shop, but then they also have lessened income that they're not receiving because the driving range isn't open or instruction isn't being allowed. So hopefully everyone that had that same question received the answer there from Ed. Let me just scan real quickly, Ed.
And on that, while you're doing that, I would just say, without knowing what the business model is for the professionals, meaning I don't know if they're employees of the places where they teach, or if they're self-employed. Under these circumstances, again, and you have according to Mr. Wheeler, under the federal side of the house, a diminution of income because your work is fell off, then you certainly can and should apply. And candidly, you let EDD figure it out. I mean, I think that's one of the messages here that I probably said a couple of times, and I'll say it again.
Okay, give me 1 second here. Does the PUA application, does that open at midnight tonight, or would that be at a specific time tomorrow? Do you know?
I don't know. I did not check the website this morning, and I don't know if anybody's tried to check it or not yet, but I looked yesterday and it was not obvious to me that there was actually a hot link available to do that. So I just don't know at this moment in time. But I think if you go to edd.gov, and I think they have a separate page for coronavirus resources. You should be able to see if they've updated that. I know they've been updating it pretty regularly.
Okay, any clarification on anticipated income, such as a golf outing that likely will be canceled?
Ooh, great question. There's really two pieces to that, I think, whether it's going to be canceled or even if it's not, whether people are going to show up. So if it hasn't happened, well, there's three pieces to it. There's also a piece of the extent to which that you're either planning or not planning, and somebody is working on getting ready for it. So with all those pieces, I think the question is going to be, if it hasn't actually been canceled yet, then, and you're still working towards it as though it were going forward, then I think at that point it's premature to file a claim for benefits. But if on the other hand, the decision is all but made not to go forward on it, and you're not working on it, and it's going to be canceled, that's a closer call. I think it's going to depend on a lot of other factual information. But at this moment in time, maybe premature. If it does get canceled and you know that it's not going to go forward in September or whenever it is, then at that point it would be appropriate to make the claim. It's a great question.
Okay, a couple others are along the same lines, basically that they've filed and they've received a customer account number but have not received any compensation. They're just wondering if they should just hold tight and be patient, utilize that same number, or start over completely with a new filing.
Yeah, again, just a general, I would not encourage them to, I mean, I think there's a queue, and my sense would be if you start over again and you get a new number, you're going to, you probably won't fall out of the queue, but it's probably not going to help you. And EDD might well get confused, and if they're confused, then they're not going to do anything to process the claim, and then they're going to ask you for follow-up and additional information. So as long as you know you've got a confirmation that the claim has been accepted or the claim has been filed, I would hang tight and bear with it and not duplicate it. That could present more problems downstream, I suspect.
Okay, great. I think that's about it. Thank you. Just a few people have asked for your presentation and those back to work guidelines. We'll be posting that on scpga.com. And we'll forward those over to Lynn and his team as well for our friends up in Northern Cal. So thanks everyone for that. That'll be posted later today.
Great. Well, thank you all. Great questions. Thank you for letting me chat with you this morning. Now I just want to go out and golf. But y'all be safe, stay strong, and hit them straight. Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, Ed, for everything and your support, ongoing support. With the previous questions and any questions that will follow with you. So we appreciate that very, very much. Before we go to Craig and the gang, Len, do you have anything before we move to Craig?
Tom, I'd just like to thank Ed for that very comprehensive go over. While he was talking, I am on the edd.gov site trying to find the release date for tomorrow. Haven't found anything yet, but again, once you send up the presentation, yes, we'll get it posted on ncpgalinks.com for sure, and then of course send it to any individual requests. So still looking for the edd.gov info, and thank you so much, Ed, for that really comprehensive view.
Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Thanks again, Ed. And another reminder, we will have if we didn't get to your question through the question queue on the presentation, and we'll follow up with a response via email as well. Now, if Mr. Kessler is still with us, would like to invite Craig, and if Kevin Fitzgerald's here, back into the Q&A session. Craig, welcome.
Good morning, Tom, Len. Thanks for inviting me back. I thought I would start off with Justin Russo, who I guess probably lives in Monterey County, a northern county, asked a series of questions. I can't answer the questions about the PGA, but I think I can shed a little bit of light on the questions he posed regarding the inconsistency in openings and closings, as well as the inconsistencies between resident restrictions and non-resident restrictions. So I know that last week I spoke about in a number of county golf communities in Southern California, the golf community, most notably in Ventura, understanding that they were going to come online well before the county of Los Angeles and they're contiguous, were a little bit worried about something happening at their golf properties that have clearly happened at the beaches in Southern California, where Los Angeles County remains, the beaches are totally closed. And in Ventura and Orange counties, they're open, and in Orange County on a partial basis. Some cities have kept them closed. So they've been slammed and they've made the front pages of the papers. We know that in each instance in Southern California where a golf community suggested a residency requirement, it was rejected by the counties. They didn't give altogether reason, thorough reasoning, but I can tell you this, in the past, I've seen opinions from county council, and most notably in Los Angeles, the big one in the state, that didn't find that resident, non-resident fee differences were legally permissible as counties, as the organs of the state. Now, Justin points out to me that Santa Cruz County has done the opposite. Who's right and who's wrong, I couldn't tell you. There's no case law on it, because as far as I'm aware, while there have been efforts to create differential fee structures, there's never been an occasion where a county or a city wanted to deny access to its golf courses to non-residents. They may give preferred access to their residents through reservation systems and certainly through pricing mechanisms, although those are not as popular as they used to be. But when it comes to that, there's simply no reason, because there's never been a compelling reason to deny golf courses business from outlying counties. So in answer to Justin's other question about why can't we all just come back aboard together, let's say as they're doing in the state of Illinois, we've all received, or perhaps even Michigan, or some of the others, keep in mind it's because Governor Newsom from the beginning of this crisis determined to handle it in a very federated manner, determining that one size didn't fit all, that it was appropriate for the state to issue a set of minimum standards, but the counties, as the main providers of public health in California, and all have their separate public health officers, that they would be the ones to be at best position to adapt to local circumstances, recognizing, just as everyone who watches the news understands, that there are differences in the pandemic curve and the impact in places like New York and North Dakota, in which a different set of standards would also be appropriate. And I think those places have rejected the sort of one size fits all thinking, and our governor did it. Now that makes it very difficult for the golf industry, there's no doubt, because as I sit here in Southern California, in every county except the two big ones, Los Angeles and San Diego, are now open for golf. And those two are moving in that direction. It's just going to take them a little bit longer because of their huge populations and because of the fact they have to ferret out those things that are outdoor recreation that are amenable to strict social distancing and those things that are not. As all of this moves forward, for example, in Ventura, carts are prohibited for at least another week. In Riverside County, one must wear a face mask while playing, something over one's face while playing golf. That's not the same in Ventura. Some places driving ranges are open, and I'm going to imagine in some places some measure of teaching with social distancing is going forward, but in most places it's proscribed. All over the map hardly covers the way this is playing out, and that is, again, so that may, for those who would have preferred statewide consistency, we probably would have been relegated to a lowest common denominator that until Los Angeles and the major Bay Area counties came back on board with golf, nobody would have come back on board. And I would just say to Justin, if you could see the emails that I've received in recent weeks from members of golf clubs who want to get out at the first possible moment onto those golf courses, I think you'd understand that holding everyone back until every county in the state was ready to move forward meant there would be no golf being played in California right now. And certainly from day one, Sacramento is the one, and I believe the only county in the state with any substantial population that has actually continued to play golf throughout the pandemic crisis, which is one of the great ironies, so that literally all of those news conferences that Governor Newsom does are immediately surrounded areas. One could have teed it up right after finishing the news conference. And for first couple of weeks, that was largely untrue anywhere else in the state of California. Even San Luis Obispo was down for a couple of days before it came back on board. So as we move forward, there will be inconsistencies. There will be, I know there's those of you who used to track AB5, and I hope we get back to tracking that very, very quickly. And as you heard from Ed Langham, when you get into uncharted territory, when you get into area for which there's no case law, you get into area in which the legislature has adopted language that's never been used before and has never been construed by a court. Oftentimes, I know the answers can be very disappointing. You can argue, the answers tend to be, you can argue one thing, you can argue another, you can talk about the way things have been generally construed, but in the final analysis, there is no definitive answer. And that is, I would argue, one of the great strengths of our legal system, but I'm going to guess that in a situation like that, I might get an argument from many listening to me right now. So as I suggested a minute ago, I think we are close in the two biggest counties in Southern California. I'm not at liberty to share all the details, except to say that the same kinds of internal discussions, and by the way, the internal discussions are different in every county because the politics are different, the public health officers are different, the golf communities most particularly are different. So there have been different leadership classes and different pressure points in each of these counties to make the case for the social distancing that golf can perform. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm going to suggest that for many, many years, both on the epidemiological level, the scientific level, the legal level, actually, and even from terms of how we responded here to much of this confusion, we'll go back and realize that we did some things well and some things poorly, and those things we didn't do as well as we thought we should have done. We'll learn some lessons and we will do a little bit better. But again, that is why there is such a disparate and widespread result. And again, I would caution that to have done otherwise would have left us with the lowest common denominator, which amounts to the Bay Area counties and probably Los Angeles counties, which are extremely unwieldy and in which the public policy makers are consumed by those images of the city of New York. We're literally having to drive up those trucks with refrigerated trucks in order to handle the dead bodies. Keep in mind, the largest city in the United States could not handle all of the bodies, and that's very telling. So that's what the pressures they were under. And as we move back, I'm going to pivot to something that Tom Addis opened up with, and I think you're going to be hearing about increasingly from whether it's from the PGA sections or the GCSA or the two amateur sections in the state. And I think at a national level, golf is extremely lucky as an activity, and as a business, that it is among the first things that will come back into our lives. It will come back. My prediction is in Los Angeles, it may come back before the beaches because it can discipline the social distancing requirements in a way that wide open public beaches cannot. We're going to be under scrutiny. The world will be watching. I think everyone who works in the golf industry understands there's a portion of the world that just doesn't like us for different sets of reasons, will consider us somehow special. And I think it's important to emphasize that what makes golf privileged or special here has nothing to do with any of those sort of prejudices that folks hold against us, but everything to do with the fact that golf can be played safely, sanely, and in accordance, a certain kind of golf, with the social distancing practices. We've been given that we're increasingly being given that opportunity. And as I've been saying, it's golfers, I think most of the facilities understand that, not all, but it's going to be a huge educational campaign to make sure that the golfers themselves understand their personal responsibility. We hew to these rules and we will remain open. And over time, those orders, in a totally inconsistent fashion, they will change county by county, will be loosened up, and more of golf will become available. I know that many listening right now are probably most interested in the teaching component, and that too will become universally available over time. Do keep in mind that this is just the end of phase one of the pandemic, and we've reached the point now where public policy officials are pretty persuaded that the pandemic curve was not going to strain, has been flattened sufficiently so that our public health system can take care of critically ill patients. There will continue to be critically ill patients, albeit perhaps less of them, but they will continue. So we're going to be playing golf against that backdrop. We're also going to be playing golf against a backdrop of roughly, last week I cited a Pew poll that showed that 80% of Americans are in favor of the stay-at-home directives. That's down to 75%, and that will probably continue to remain. So we're opening up a little bit against the grain of general public opinion. So again, we're going to be scrutinized. Also keep in mind that I'm not an epidemiologist, but they all seem to agree on one thing, that all viral epidemics, or pandemics as in this case, have waves, and that there will be a second wave of this when we get to the fall or winter. How big it will be, nobody knows, because we're dealing with it's called novel coronavirus for a reason. It's brand new. So we're just beginning to understand some of its properties. But all viruses have one property: they do have multiple waves. With any luck, the waves get smaller over time. But keep in mind, the one great pandemic, the one that was enormously consequential in American history anyway, not in world history, but we're not as old as the world, was 100 years ago with what's called the Spanish flu, although it didn't start in Spain. And it was the second wave that caused most of the damage in the United States anyway, and roughly 600,000 persons died, which is, I believe, more than World War II. So, and it was the second wave, and San Francisco was one of the most egregious examples in the United States, in that literally in wave one, when San Francisco got down to 0 cases and thought they had it beaten, they opened up everything wide, and they were, I believe, one of the 2 or 3 American cities most hurt in the wave that came in the winter of 1919, 6, 8, 10 months later. This is in the back of the minds of policymakers and epidemiologists, and so we have no idea what that's going to bring, but we have every idea that the key thing moving forward, I think we've all been focused on how do we continue to sustain the case that golf can be open under these conditions. And we've won that case, and that's going to play itself out very shortly, I believe, throughout the state. I'm going to issue this caveat again for those listening in Northern California. Kevin and I work for the Southern California Golf Association. Now, when it comes to state legislation, it applies equally to the entire state. But on something like this, which is literally county by county by county, understand that we are very close to our clubs and our facilities in all of those Southern California counties, less close in the north. We hear from them, but we don't hold ourselves out experts on exactly the conversations that may be going on in Contra Costa County, because we have no clubs in Contra Costa County and thus facilities that are in regular contact with us on those points. So I want to issue that caveat in case I said something here that's consistent throughout Southern California in this federated response to the coronavirus that may not be true in a Northern California county. But as we move on, again, one thing that will be universal will be the scrutiny that we will be under. Somebody who works in the golf industry and has for many years last year made the point to me in a private conversation that all it takes is one bad photograph in the San Francisco Chronicle or the San Diego Union Tribune or the Riverside Press Enterprise or the Los Angeles Times showing golfers, just like we saw with the beaches, violating social distancing requirements, and we could be in trouble. That could represent a 0.5% of the behavior, but we will be judged again by our lowest common denominator in terms of performance. With that, with any luck, I hope I answered more questions in that extemporaneous presentation than I raised. Again, thanks for inviting me. This is a confusing situation. With any luck, it'll be the first and last time all of us have to deal with a total shutdown of golf, a total shutdown of the economy, and a novel coronavirus that happens to have very contagious propensities, and move forward. So with that, I'll yield back the floor and see if indeed I did shed more light than heat on some of the issues that I tried to clarify.
Craig, you always shed light, and we appreciate that very, very much. And just to reiterate before we get into some questions, your comment about the photograph and how, I'm just going to use the word important that is, that like we've said throughout this this chat today, how important it is, the perception and public opinion is in this regard, that we maintain our position as being a leader when we get to outdoor recreation, especially, and the availability of outdoor recreation, and to sustain that going through this. It's so important that we manage ourselves going forward, and our best, as the old saying goes, our best foot forward in that regard. So thanks for saying that, and thanks everybody for listening in that regard. And I believe Nikki has some questions for you, Craig.
Craig, just a couple here. Note on the San Diego County website saying that golf courses will be able to be open this Friday, May 1st. Can you confirm that?
Well, I would wonder what San Diego County, I guess that's the county's website. I believe that to be true, but as someone taught me years ago in politics, don't trust anything until you see the vote. So that is not a final decision, but I think that's what everyone is anticipating in San Diego.
Okay, thank you. And then will facilities still have to comply with ADA regulations and allow golf cars if the golf course elects to go walking only?
Yes, and that came up in Ventura County because the initial order that came out on Saturday night proscribed carts, and very quickly that question was posed, what about ADA? And the answer back from the county was yes, with proper documentation. So they were going to be very careful that those who getting those carts before the prescription, in other words, it can't just be because you prefer to take a cart. It has to be because you absolutely need the cart. I don't know how much they're checking on that, but I can say that if you take a spot check of a facility and see a handful of carts, that's not going to be a problem. But if you get out in a facility and you see 70 individual carts out there, that might raise some questions, and that might even prompt an investigation.
Okay, thanks, Craig. I think that's it. I think you covered everything else. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks again, Craig, and we look forward to being with you Mondays and Fridays. So with that, Mr. Dumas.
Thank you, Tom. And again, our thanks to PGA of America Secretary John Linder, to Ed Langhammer, Craig and Kevin, and Tom and Nikki, of course, as well. So I think we all know, and I've heard again, had to reinforce today about how just difficult this situation is, and how it may also seem so inconsistent, but that's the reality. From county to county, things are different. And we look at the order, though there is a shelter-in-place order, there are a couple of key components which are essential and non-essential activities. So that's where the differences come in. And all we can do is monitor each as best we can, because the news changes so quickly. For instance, it's on SF Gate this morning that many counties may now follow Solano County's lead about extending the shelter in place to May 17. But again, we have to go a little deeper, and within that, look at how are they handling the essential and non-essential activities and businesses. And also, as Mr. Langhammer mentioned, how the information coming out of the EDD and the federal government is not necessarily as clear as it might be. So the purpose of these chats is to do that, is to work through it together, work through these complex issues together, and pass along the information as best we can, as quickly as we can, and as accurately as we can. So Tom, thank you so much. And I'd like to toss it now to our section president, Dee Dee Moriarty. Dee Dee.
Thanks, Len. Hey, good morning, everybody. I always appreciate the opportunity to say hello from San Francisco, where we're currently in about our 56th day of shelter in place. But it's a beautiful day, and we're going to enjoy it the best we can. So I hope everybody's doing well. Tom and Len, thank you for all you do to set up these calls. They're awesome. And thanks to our speakers, John, Ed, and Craig. You know, you gave us so much valuable information today. And now I know it's going to help a lot of people, so it's really, really appreciated. So briefly, you know, it's just encouraging that golf is being recognized by many as one of the safest sports to transition to, and to going into our new world. That means a lot. And I know that we're going to do our best to make sure we comply with best practices and the safety standards, because we really need golf to be a hero now and to keep our golf courses open. So I'm just going to close with my 3 happy thoughts for today. Golf's not open yet in San Francisco, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that that might happen pretty soon. My second happy thought is Tiger versus Phil. I'm looking forward to it in May, because I know it's got to be at least as entertaining as the NFL draft. So that's going to be lots of fun. And number 3, golf without fans. Well, I think we'll take it, especially the PGA and the Ryder Cup. So be safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll shoot it back to Tom.
Thanks, Dee Dee, and thanks, Len, and again, thanks to everyone. A couple comments before we leave here today. The tours at least have a schedule for reopening. For example, the PGA Tour at the Charles Schwab on June 11th, the LPGA Tour on June 19th, which is the week prior to the Women's PGA Championship. So at least we're looking at those kinds of dates right now. And that's something we can look forward to. Of course, there will probably, and the tour's already announced, there will not be any spectators. So, but at least we have a date on the horizon. Golf Central and Morning Drive are back on the air. That's always nice to have that opportunity to listen in there as well. Remind you once again that scpga.com, ncpgalinks.com, and pga.org for information. On scpga.com, we have a list of resources that you may need and will need to reopen, as far as sanitary supplies and whatever that might be. We have a fairly extensive list of those under our COVID-19 links. So take a look at that if you need be, which you probably will be. I noticed one thing on this chat, and before we leave today, that the number was a little less, not too many in comparison to previous, but we were down around 210, 212 attendees today. That's a good sign because we've been up close to 250, and I believe it's a good sign because that means that more and more of our PGA professionals are going back to work. So if we see that number diminish each chat that we have, I think that's a good sign. So with that, have a great week. Look forward to seeing you on Friday. Thanks again, and stay safe and set a good example for everybody. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your attendance.